Hello, folks. Thanks for staying. Great to see you all. Even better to see this man here. Again, please, another round of applause for Kalu. And while you're in the applause-making kind of mood, we will make this very easy for young Tyson Palmer, wherever he is. Tyson, could you stand up, please? And we're going to just applaud you uproariously. I think it's safe to say we'll be seeing a lot more of young Tyson Palmer into the future. So congratulations on your work in this beautiful film, Tyson. And Kalu, congratulations on your work, writer-director for this fantastic film.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I want to talk to you, and we want to talk to you about Pasa Faho, but you also shared a beautiful short with us at the start. And I want to go back. There was a lot that we've just seen. But that short really is something. It almost strikes me that it's a film in kind of two parts.
Yeah.
And we have this moment, this kind of almost like record scratch moment with this couple where a name is pronounced, a name comes into the world. Is it Gabe? Is it Gabriel? And suddenly we see this kind of dynamic shift. And it kind of got me tense watching it. It's like this moment of tension. I'm like, what's going to happen with this couple? Tell us about how this idea developed for this moment of this couple.
For sure. And thank you guys for entertaining it. We've screened this film, the short, what's the name? I think it's the third time screening it before Pasa Faho. And the first time I forgot to mention that it was playing, and I think the audience kind of sat there for the first few minutes. They're like, what is going on? So thanks for being along with the journey. But it's, and the reason we've paired it with Pasa Faho for a few of the screenings, one, it's a lot of the same crew. We have the same DOP, same producers, same composer. I think some other crew also worked on Pasa Faho. But particularly the methodology of that film, which we brought a little bit into the feature, but it was this idea, I had this kind of one-pager, this conversation, it was a very rough conversation. I had this kind of pivot point within that conversation that I wanted to capture something that felt very soft and romantic and nice and dreamy in a way, very heightened. And then that kind of just gets flipped on its head while the camera's rolling. So that was kind of the framework I went in there with, and then I worked with Farah Masodza on a short film beforehand. She's an incredible actress, an incredible collaborator, and so I kind of took the idea to her, and then we spent, with Makwaya, we spent 3 or 4 weekends kind of building those characters, building that world, all centered around this kind of pivot point, but as the details of those characters became fleshed out, then we learned about Gabe, and we learned about, Igor's insecurities, and all these sorts of things came out, and we're like, that's good, let's use that for the switch.
It's all kind of lurking below the surface for those characters. I walked away from it thinking like, do I have a lot of hope for this couple? And I'm just not sure that I do somehow. God bless them, I hope they all do well. Let's switch into that fantastic feature that you just shared with us, Pasa Faho. And maybe we'll stick with the performances and the way in which you work with those actors. There was so much I enjoyed about your film, but there was one scene in particular with the aunties in the kitchen. And, this is not my community, but I married into a Greek-Italian family, and that could have been my wife Zia's, that could have been my wife's auntie. That vibe, that kind of... that sense of celebration and joy and fun, that naturalism is really hard to tease out with actors and in performance. So could you tell us about that process to get that kind of vibe on set and on the screen?
For sure, I definitely can. And I'm about to say everything, but honestly, so much of the credit goes to who is in front of the camera. But I think that scene in particular, no one in that scene has been on screen before, has performed before in front of a camera. And that was the case with a lot of, Tyson's actually quite experienced, and so is okay, and a few of the other cast, but we had a lot of first-time performers because of the specificity of the film and because of what we were exploring. And that scene, I think I was aware of, I've worked that way in short films before, and I've built a bit of an awareness in terms of how I believe you can help prepare an actor, and I think so much of the work is done in the casting process and finding the people who are going to bring something special to the screen. And then from that point, it's trying to make them comfortable enough to be able to be in front of camera and be that free and be that playful and be that connected. But I think the kind of magic of that scene probably helps that they may have met before. The community in Australia is not massive, so kind of everyone, when you meet someone, it's instantly family. What's up? There's like always 1 degree or half a degree separation. But maybe we had one rehearsal, or maybe it was just on the day, but I think they spent a few hours together and everyone was quite excited. And so we were all shooting other scenes and they were in the green room somewhere trying out all these different lines and this stuff. And they're like, oh, we can do this, and we can try that, and we can try that. And I think that was great for the practicality of getting the lines down pat, but it was also great in terms of building this rapport between them. So by the time they stepped onto set, there was such a comfort that wasn't too difficult to tease out, to be honest, as a director.
Well, it comes across loud and clear on screen. It's a beautiful thing. And let's stay with those performances for a little bit, because we have Tyson doing his amazing work, an emerging actor, but we also have a really experienced actor in the form of OK. So tell me about how you found him and how he came on board for this film.
We were casting, so for those who don't know, OK is a 20, 30 year, he's a great in Nigerian stand-up comedy and in Nollywood as well. He's had a very, very long and very prosperous career. So we were casting the film in Australia for maybe a year before OK came on board. Because we're working with kind of limited resources and the specificity of it, we're casting it. I was in the WhatsApp groups, I was in the Facebook groups, I was on everyone's phone who I could get on their phone. And speaking to people in Brisbane and Melbourne and Perth, in Sydney, everywhere. And we were casting and we kind of came across people and there was some great talent. A lot of people kind of ended up in the film in some capacity. But we kind of hit the 6-month mark and I was like, we're finding some people, but there's, this role kind of carries the film in a way. We need that. We need that charisma. We need that charm. We need that confidence. But we also need that pathos and the delicacy that kind of comes toward the end of the film. And so there's a few people who I was, we kind of would do rehearsal, we'd do auditions, and then we'd do rehearsals, and we'd kind of workshop the material. And I think, we just got to, we got maybe 3 months out from the film. I was in Nigeria at that time, actually. I wish my producers were here to talk about this, because for me it's kind of rosy, but for them I think it was a lot more stressful trying to organise a visa. But yeah, we kind of hit this point where we're like, we needed to kind of just swing big in some way. So we reached out to OK, and he read the script, and then we negotiated, and 2 months later he was in Melbourne, and we were doing this crazy production together.
Fantastic. You mentioned Nigeria there. We know you've been touring around with this film, MIF and Sydney, Yeppoon, all the great film locations. But you took this film to Nigeria as well, and we have quite a lovely reverential audience here who sat and watched that film and took it all in. But you were talking earlier, that was a different experience in Nigeria.
Yeah, it's I think one of my favourite cinema experiences.
Tell us about it.
For sure. But I think that the way I describe it, it was this. And it's reflective of the culture in so many ways, but it was like an active conversation. I think sitting in that cinema in Lagos, and there was I won't go into it, but there's the whole day leading up to it had been this series of events and miss events and all these sorts of things, and it felt so right in retrospect. And when we were sitting there in that cinema, it was we've had so many beautiful screenings and so many exciting audiences. And I think because most of my life has been spent here and most of my cinema experiences are spent here, I've got a tendency to go into a cinema and expect to kind of sit back and observe, and you're kind of poised, and you maybe have a slight chuckle, and then you go outside and you have a glass of wine or a coffee and you unpack, the themes and what the filmmaker was trying to do and everything. But that was all happening in real time in the cinema. So it was, and it was incredible, Like we were talking about this before, but I love cinema. You love cinema, and that's the reason. That's the reason. So we can get into a room with people who are interested in seeing something new and having a conversation. But to kind of have that conversation as the film is going, I was stoked, to be honest. It was it's cool, guys.
And one of the things I love about cinema going and seeing film on a screen with other people is moments come alive in a way that they don't at home or on our phones or when we're on public transport, whatever it might be. It's a far more kind of solo and sometimes a less impactful experience. So I wonder, as you've toured this film round, do you sort of detect moments that surprise you in people's reactions? Like there's moments of laughter in this film, there's moments of real pathos and sadness and delicacy as well. But has there been audience reactions that have surprised you or maybe that you didn't expect? No, it's completely aligned.
No. It's not. I'm trying to kind of condense my sprawling answer.
I'll share one.
Okay.
Like, for some reason, the moment it's a small little moment, but I just keep on coming back to it. When Obi said, "Oh, you've got to go," and Oki said, "No, you've got to go." Like it's just that kind of sharing that dynamic is a really kind of beautiful small thing, but it really stood out for me.
I think now, thinking about it now, and it's almost the same with the short as well, but I think the humour in this film, and I've always described this film like comedy, or comedy drama, and I think a lot of times throughout the development process, people kind of read it and they're like, it's not really that funny, which is, it's just, and it's kind of just something I have to kind of work out, but the voice is growing. But I think one of the scenes that maybe kind of sits in that ambiguous zone is the scene when Azubuike is ranting to Obinna in the bathroom. Because kind of, it's kind of as he's spiraling, and there's been definitely audience to audience. There's some audiences we're sitting there, and it's just complete silence, and everyone's like, oh my God, no. And then other times it just erupted with laughter. It's a very hilarious scene because it is hilarious. And it's all improvisation. He improv that scene.
Right.
So, and I'm sure Tyson remembers that scene very fondly. But yeah, I think there's kind of, I'm sure there's moments in the film I think that kind of play in that space where it's, I'm not really sure if I should laugh here, I'm not really sure if I should feel sad here. Yeah. So it's very interesting to see what audiences gravitate toward.
Absolutely. There's one other scene that really stood out for me is that moment at the party, and the elder is talking about a lot of things, but talking about success in the community, individual success, and talking about work and talking about expectations. And, there was a quote that stuck with me, an essence of what it must be carried forward. To be Igbo is to be something you felt. Like that kind of is a powerful idea, that idea of an essence being carried forward. And I wonder if that's something that, as a Igbo-Australian filmmaker yourself, that you also kind of relate to, that idea of carrying forward an essence. Like it's a big idea, but it's one that is kind of grappled with really strongly in your film.
Yes, so much so. It sits at the heart of this film, and it's sat, in my psyche and in my spirit for a very, very long time. I'm still working out what that relationship is for me. But yeah, it's very. I don't know if I have a final answer on. I don't even know if there is a final answer on kind of where that conversation comes to or where that question comes to. But I think that scene is maybe emblematic of kind of the whole the thesis of the film in a way.
The other theme that comes through for me in this is actually about work and about labour, because when you work, it can be a really dignifying thing for people. It can be a source of great pride, but we also sort of have this sense in the film of work being, there's a tension there because it can take us away from family, and it can kind of be a bridge for family. I mean, there's that beautiful line from the elder about not being able to tell you the colour of my father's eyes, but I always knew that they were there taking care of me. Is that something that you were conscious of, this idea of work and labour and how it's like this fundamental thing in our lives?
So much so, and I think in many ways this film is asking questions of how we show love and how we receive love and what that language is, and what happens when there's a disconnect between those expectations. And so I think for someone like Azubuike, for someone like Chinedu, who's the elder at the barbecue, and for a lot of the adults I've seen in my life, and a lot of the kind of questions I was even asking myself, there's this. When there's such a tension, when your identity, it becomes such a solid part of your identity. And I think I was in my mind's eye, I've got a lot of people who project very strong images of themselves, and images, these versions of themselves that are stoic and able to endure and able to provide and able to do all those things. And there's such a celebration in that when it's going well, but then when that starts to crack, it can be a very incredibly destabilizing thing. Your whole sense of identity is starting to shatter, and that's what happens to Azubuike in that film. But it was most definitely at the heart of that film.
Filmmaking is always hard. Making films on film, like shooting on film, is also hard. I get the sense it's a very deliberate choice for you, though. We saw it in the short. We see it in this feature. Why is that important to you to make that choice?
I'm nowhere at the Cinémathèque, so I feel like I'm gonna break some hearts right now. But the shot we shot on 16. The feature was we shot digital and then printed onto film, which feels like this kind of run around process. And we had a lot of discussions about this in development and pre-production. And it was probably one of the aspects that I'd say I fought for the most. And I think there was a few reasons for the sake of Pasa Faho, and even for the sake of the short films. You know, I'm very aware of the experience I want to create for the audience, and that when people sit down to watch this film, I'm trying to recreate this experience like you're at your auntie's house for the weekend, and you've gone into her wardrobe and you've pulled out this old VHS and you've wiped the dust off it and you've put it in the player, and this whole kind of world's opened up to you. You know, that's such a tangible feeling for me, and it's what I want to create with the films, particularly for Pasa Faho. When we're talking about these communities that, you know, it's been released in 2025, but we've been here for decades, and so I wanted this kind of a sense of history with that film. To be honest, there's a whole conversation around why that was a very difficult thing to do, and we drafted up many plans, and we did all these visual tests, and we're going to send the film to Japan or to Bali or to somewhere, and it's very hard to insure a film. I've learnt when the stock is being sent overseas.
Yes.
And yeah, long story short, we couldn't, but it's a way that I like to work, both kind of on set, what the energy it's created on set, and then kind of what it does for the identity of the film. And so this kind of, even though it's a bit of a runaround process, the idea of printing it onto film was more of this statement of intention, I guess, in terms of what I want to do moving forward, what we want to do moving forward.
Yes. You've also talked in the past of the notion of your films as an artefact, and I think sometimes when we think of artefacts, we think of things that are maybe old or preserved, but your film has a real timeless quality, even to the sense of, you know, positing it in a particular era, like it could be at many different times. Why is it important to you, that kind of artefact idea?
There are so many reasons, and I'm trying to think of the ones that aren't so personal, because I feel very.
We're here for the personal ones too. You can share. That's all right.
Well,
it's a friendly audience.
It's a very friendly audience. But one of the most simple layers, I've just got an affinity to this type of work. I think, you know, I grew up watching films shot in this way, and it felt like this, and even that felt like this when I watched them back then, and that feel like this now. And so I think just, you know, that taste is something that I've kind of just grown up with, and that's naturally found its way into my own work. But again, maybe, you know, more contextually to the work we're making, and the work wanting to tell, we're exploring stories and characters that are kind of more or less just finding their way onto the screens in Australia. And I think there's this, I like the ambiguity around the worlds that we're kind of presenting. That it doesn't feel, I don't know. It doesn't. Cheapen is not the right word, but it kind of just gives it this kind of longevity, or this it gives it something.
Is that what you responded to for certain films when you were coming through that you loved, that had that timeless kind of quality to them?
So much so. And then when I think about the world, there's this film I've talked about way too much, but there's this film called Losing Ground from 1982, and I think it was this film I had the strongest emotional response to when I watched it. And it's an American film, independent American film, about a professor and her husband, and their marriage falls apart. But it's a black filmmaker, and I saw it at MIF, I think, in 2016 or 17. But it was this film that was like this janky 1980s, very independent, handmade, beautiful, but very much of the time and of an era, and had that kind of timelessness to it. But then exploring these characters, which I felt like, you know, that I connected to in a way that I hadn't connected to through other films that have all those aesthetic qualities. It was this kind of revelation moment or something. And so I think, you know, that was a very, very powerful experience. And so I want that when I watch my own films, and I kind of want to create that for the audience as well, for those for whom it matters.
Yeah, which I think is everyone here who got to see that this afternoon. One of the most important roles of a moderator is keeping things to time. So I have an allocated amount of time that we're very closely coming to the end of. But I suppose one question I want to ask you, Kalu, before we wrap is, you've talked a little bit about your methodology for this film, like your way of approaching these stories you want to tell, these stories you want to write, these stories you want to direct on screen. What are you going to bring forward from this film into your next project? And could you maybe tell us a little bit about next projects, if you can? I know you're very much in the midst of this one.
One of the big, so I think previously I've worked with trained actors, but probably no one to the scale of OK or even Tyson, to be honest. You know, there were many moments on set where I was directing Tyson and he'd do something during a take. I'm like, oh my God, this kid can act. And so I think, you know, in terms of talent, there was this exceptionality to the people we worked with in this film. And so I think pairing that, I've always had this. I'm a very much an actor's director. I love. We talked about this before, but you know, my ideal for a pre-production development period would be 3 months in a room together, and we're talking about backstories and then improvising and shooting that with a camcorder and going home and rewriting the script and then coming back in and trying some new ideas. And, you know, sending each other messages at midnight, being like, "Oh, what if the character thought like this in this moment?" All this sort of stuff. I love this sort of stuff. And I think what I also learned on Pasa Faho is when you have someone with such a toolkit and such a range, there's this kind of, those two things can combine to something that is very, very, very powerful. And so I'm looking forward to trying to, you know, build on that methodology, but also continue to work with incredible talent. The stories I'm writing right now, I think there's a range. There's two. One's kind of a mystery, one's a romance. And both kind of have maybe a heart similar to Pasa Faho in a way, even though they're very different worlds and very different characters.
And films you would make here in Australia? Or
yeah. One here, one in Nigeria. The
Cool.
two scripts I'm focusing on right now. One here, one in Nigeria.
Watch this space.
Watch this space.
Folks, it's a joy to be able to share an afternoon with you all watching a film like this and speaking to a creative like this. I want to thank Rob and the Cinémathèque for their amazing support, their ongoing support of screen culture and all things good about film in Brisbane. I want to thank you for all coming along today. I want to thank a big thanks to Tyson Palmer and his incredible work. But most of all, I want to thank this man here, Kalu Oji. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.